Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our session all about technology adoption in procurement, what's working and what's not. I will be your moderator today. So if you have any questions during the session, there's a Q&A chat where you can ask the questions. And in the end, we will actually have enough time to go through them and share additional insights on your asks. Well, I'm not alone today. Actually, we have three people today in the webinar. We have Maggie from Archlet and Simon from our client Emmi. And I would just quickly introduce myself and then hand it over to you, Maggie. So, hi everyone, I'm Lukas. I'm one of the co-founders of Archlet, and I'm leading everything related to our clients here at Archlet. And technology adoption is a topic I have already dealt with for the last couple of years. And I'm actually very happy to have you both with me today because we will definitely share some interesting insights and tips and tricks how you can better adopt software in procurement. Maggie, what about you?
Yes, hi, and thank you, Lucas and Simon as well. I'm Margareta, or Maggie, as you've heard, and I'm heading our customer education team here at Archlet. My background is in adoption and in customer success. So I did work for several vendors before in customer success and customer education. And prior to that, I did my PhD on IT adoption. So what I've learned back then is something that I still try to also implement in my jobs. And that's why I will also tell you a bit more about the theoretical background when it comes to technology adoption of individuals.
Thank you. And then our special guest, Simon, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Hello, everybody out there. My name is Simon Berweger. I'm responsible for procurement at Emmi. I'm responsible on group level, so coordinating all our procurement activities around the globe. Thereby, I would like to spend just a word or two on our company, as I heard from Lucas that we have a quite international audience today. Emmi is a Swiss dairy company, actually the biggest one here in Switzerland, but we are also having businesses abroad, mainly in the western part of the world, so all over Europe, but as well in the US and Southern America. So we're currently having a revenue of a bit bigger than 4 billion. So that's just to frame it a bit, what we are doing. So our business is ready to drink coffee like Emmi Cafe Latte or cheese like famous Kalbach Gruyere or so. Probably some of you know.
Or fondue.
Or fondue, yes, sure. And raclette, everything. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure to have you. And well, let's kick it off. And I think we start with a brief question. Why do we care at Archlet about technology adoption? And for that, I want to do a quick step back and tell you briefly about the procurement processes. Because again, whenever we talk about adoption of a technology in procurement, it usually serves a purpose, and that purpose solves a pain point or follows a process. Ideally, it does both. And we at Archlet, as an example, we are located in the source to contract area, which is sometimes also seen as the strategy execution part of the whole procurement process. However, there's something in front of us, more upstream of us, where people usually refer to category strategy or plan to strategy, where you try to understand your categories, define strategies, and then execute, for example, through a sourcing event. But there's also something more downstream, which would be everything about purchasing, POs, PRs, requisition, so paying suppliers and handling invoices. And there's something around everything, which we then say this is usually the supplier relationship management part, where you make sure you keep relationships ongoing with your suppliers. When we now have a look at the technology adoption of these different processes through systems, we actually see that there's a lot of adoption in the procure to pay area. Why? Because historically, that's where all the digitalization started in procurement. The first thing companies did 20, 24 years ago, they digitalized invoices from paper to digital. What also is a very well adopted area is everything on the very left-hand side, areas in the area called spend analytics. So trying to visualize your spend and help you understand where do you spend how much money and with whom and with which supplier. if we now have a look into the sourcing area, what we will realize, and what you probably know already, is that there is one big leader in that area, and this is Microsoft by Excel and Outlook. And very often we talk to clients, large corporates, global organizations, and they tell us that in the area of sourcing, they still mainly use email and Excel. And of course, as Archlet, we try to ask ourselves, why is this the case, right? It's also one of the reasons we exist, because the adoption of technology in that area is very low. So when we try to understand it, we kind of used a metrics. We stole it actually from Steve Jobs, so no credits for that, where we have two axes. One regarding the intelligence, so smart and not so smart, and one regarding the ease of use and hard to use. Now, looking into the market, it's very clear that first generation software tools are actually not so smart. Why? Because they started 20 years ago, technology was limited. Tools who solve complexity or who are a bit more intelligent are unfortunately very hard to use. And this results in fact that in that area, it's very tough to have a software to actually increase adoption across different categories. This is more or less the reason why we exist and where we play. So as Archlet, our mission is to solve that. Even though you will hear today that there are a lot of challenges we need to overcome together with our clients. And we play in this source to award / source to contract area. And of course, you have already guessed it. We try to become the smartest and easiest to use sourcing solution. However, this is something we now elaborate together. So when we look into the adoption area of technologies, there are different waves usually, or different trends. And we just brought you a few of these waves or trends. A big one at the moment is increasing emphasis on sustainability. Another one, for example, what you hear definitely very often is automation. Everything to further automate your tasks. And last but not least, there is a big emphasis on leveraging AI technologies across businesses. And when we look into technology adoption, we try to actually use an analogy about waves, because at Archlet, we really like to surf. So we try now to kind of show you what we mean with that. And Maggie, I think you take over here and tell us how we actually get the right surfboards to actually surf on the right waves or on the right trends with the right tools from a research perspective.
Yes, thanks for introducing also the metaphor. And why we would talk about surfboards, don't worry, it's not too long about surfing and surfboards if you have no connection with that. But if you think about a tool that helps you ride a wave, obviously the surfboard is the first one that comes to mind. And basically all the kinds of technologies, all the software tools that you have, they serve as your vehicle. They serve a purpose, and that is to ride that wave and to be part of that wave and help master that wave in some aspects. So what we commonly see is like in a bit of a Oprah Winfrey style, that people go and say like, you get a surfboard, everyone gets a surfboard, everyone gets access to this tool, everyone gets access to ride that wave with us. And what you would probably expect or hope as to have as a reaction is people love it. They come and they tell you like, yes, we love water sports. This is the first time that finally I get to use that surfboard. Finally, I get to learn how to ride the waves. They're ecstatic. So now with a little bit of a reality check, has that actually been a common scenario for you? If you think about it in the past, if you've actually been part of an adoption or like a rollout, I think if you're lucky, you will have one really avid surfer or a water sports fan in your team. But the other parts of the team or the other parts of the potential users maybe look a bit more like that they are voicing their concerns. They are a bit afraid of the open water. You hear from your colleagues or your employees that they may be not too excited about it, or they have respect and are afraid that they can't learn that new skill, or just don't know what to expect. Maybe the waves are too high for the surfboard that they actually have. And then there are also the ones that just flat out tell you, I hate this. I hate everything that has to do with water, with water sports, with surfboards. And they just don't want to do anything that has to do with the surfboard and the entire ocean, basically. So most of you, I wonder, have you actually encountered all those scenarios, or probably a mixture thereof? I'm guessing yes. I'm guessing maybe you can also place yourself in one of these groups when you think about other tools that you had to learn or you had to adopt. And you're not alone. I think one of the typical things that we see in anything that is a big purchase, especially also in SaaS, in software, is buyer's remorse. You go and you're super excited at the beginning. You have new surfboards. You want everyone to learn it and you are excited about them. Maybe also your team is very excited about it. And then you are in the valley of remorse where you just realize no one is really using that surfboard or riding the waves as much as you expected them to. And then hopefully you reach that threshold where you see that surfing is actually fun, and also your team realizes that surfing is actually fun. And that is just the analogy that helps us to talk about why people actually use surfboards from a research perspective. And if I continue to tell you a bit more like about the why, we are in the depths of behavioral research. And if you look at research and research models, what you typically see is that when you try to understand human action or human intention, then you go ahead and try to explain it with the attitude someone has towards a specific action and also subjective norms. And these two are what we call in the research are variables or constructs that you can actually measure. Probably you've been taken part in the questionnaire and you can measure that by asking specific questions. And then you understand how strongly they are like influencing intention. So someone's intention to actually use something or towards a specific behavior. And at the end, you can measure the actual behavior. But that intention, like you need to basically find ways on how to get closer to it and how to really understand it. And this is a very simplistic model. There are more, and the more variables and the more factors you actually add at the left side, so the ones that explain the intention of the behavior, the better your explanation power. So the more of the intention you actually explain. So that's like the fine line that you have to do in research, that you try to add as many as needed of these factors. So you only want to add the factors that are really explaining a lot. And there was several developments in research, and one of the models that came out to explain quite a bit of the intention and the actual behavior is called UTaught, the Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology. And we have those two variables still at the end that we would want to explain. We want to explain intention, we want to explain use behavior. And what we found in research is that there are 4 of these factors or 4 drivers that explain quite a bit of that, and they all influence directly behavior intention or use of behavior. And you see there are a lot of errors as well, because most of them, or the strength, how much each of the factors actually explains intention and user behavior, is moderated, is also explained by other factors. So everyone, also the strength, how much someone experienced social influence, how much that actually explains intention, depends on the age, the gender, the experience, and the voluntariness of use for the specific user, for the specific individual that you're asking. So that is a very theoretical point of view on how we want to understand, or how we can understand and explain intention to use and actually user behavior. And what we'll do in the next part is that we actually go through those four drivers, so the 4 driving factors at the left. And we want to tell you about what we actually found out can work for us as a vendor, but also from Emmi's point of view, what they see has worked for them in the past. So let's go through them, and I will explain it.
We really try now to bring that theory to life, right?
Exactly.
With you, Simon. So we have these 4 areas: performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, and facilitating conditions. And I would just say, let's go through it and see what stories we have to share, what was working well and what was maybe also working not so well.
So let's kick off with performance expectancy and just what's behind that name. It sounds very fancy, but actually what it means is that this explains how much an individual, like a user, believes that a surfboard or a system actually helps them get better at their job. So, or to have any kind of advantage in their job performance in here. And what we saw can help is that you actually try to explain how that specific tool, how that specific service solves their problem so that they can better understand how much it helps them, how to demonstrate, or you need to demonstrate how they could spend more time on the tasks that they actually enjoy. And another initiative or another way on how to get that performance expectancy higher is to incentivize or penalize the usage and show how users could benefit or how it could hinder their career advancement. And now I'm actually really interested to see, like, how much of that have you tried, Simon, and what has worked and what hasn't worked for you?
Thank you very much, Maggie, for handing over to me. So, from my perspective, I mean, yes, truly right what you're saying here. Nevertheless, sometimes there is still a gap between what you're doing and what happens in practice. So, actually, or the good thing about Archlet is that to whomever I talked in our company, they see the benefits. So that's the good one. But I have another example for you. As I formerly worked also as a program manager in for ERP implementations, and as you know, ERP solutions are huge. They are huge and they solve a lot of problems. And what I saw there, it's especially important to understand who are the opinion leaders and what is their problem, because that was something which we did completely, or which I did completely wrong back then, that I didn't tackle this, let's say, fear of that person, which was a very strong opinion leader for it. It was always clear that we don't address this topic directly, but the ERP implementation back then was a necessity. So it's very, very important that you understand the problem, as you said before, Lukas, or understanding the wave. How big is it? How tall is it? What is it exactly? What they bring? What's thrown at us? And how does this look to the ones which are most affected? So I'm pointing out these persons which you say which are not even interested in surfing, and there it's very important to get close to them, understand what's their problem, what do they fear, how can you help them with what you have at hand so that you positively influence these opinion leaders. So there it's really nitty-gritty work, I would call it, really down to the detail. It's not just doing the big marketing campaigns at this level. Here it's very much about influencing an individual. So being clear how this person can have see also something positive out of the whole mission which you are approaching. And ultimately, as a last option, I would see that you could try to make sure that your communication is more prominent than the one of this opinion leader, which might be a tough one, but you can at least try it if everything is kind of lost. So that's what we tried back then, or what I tried, to really get control over what's the overall perception of the solution by pointing out consistently and then continuously the big benefits and how important this is, and that this is a necessary step. So that was what we learned in another context, but their individuals really matters. And with what we see here about explanation, it's often appointed to a wider group, which does not always do the trick.
And I think this one, so you mentioned it kind of a bit already, but proactive communication, right? So making sure that you address their problems. And I have one story to share, if I may, as well. When we started Archlet, our mission was always to onboard as many users as possible at the same time. And we did that by showing one specific demo. And what we didn't understand well enough in the beginning was what are their problems in their sourcing events. So we thought we actually approached them well, but the examples they've seen and the problems we solved were not 100% their own problems. So we lost very quickly attention from them because it was more important to do something else than kind of understand how we solve problems from others. So the learning for us was that, especially in the sourcing area, rollouts on a category specific level is very helpful because you can consolidate the same people with the same problems and approach them with the right communication to bring them on board and make sure they use the surfboard, not only in the beginning, but actually continuously. Thank you. Then we have another one. I think we
Yes.
just go down the line, right? Next
Yeah,
one
it's
would be
basically following that
effort
process.
expectancy.
And I think the next one is not a big surprise, and probably not something that you expected to be behind that explanation. But basically, effort expectancy means if or can a person answer the question if it's valuable for them. So is the investment they put into it, is it easy enough, it's convenient enough to use, worth the value that they get out of? I think that's that some of us, or most of us, do. It's like immediately when you are faced with something new, especially, that you try to evaluate, is it worth it? Is it worth my time and effort? And how we know, or some initiative that worked, that can work, is that you demonstrate the ease of use. You can demonstrate it with demos, so with demonstrations of videos, or by giving people access to a tool so they can actually see for themselves as well that something is working and that it is not too much of an investment on their end. What also is important, that you bring the tool, anything that is new, into a context of what is already there. Everything new is usually difficult to accept. We're like that as humans, that new things are potential risks for us. So it helps us to fit it into a context. And same as well, to compare it with something that they already know. So Lukas mentioned earlier, Excel Outlook is there and it's something that everyone knows. So is there a way that you can compare it to a tool like this or a previous tool, and compare it and make it more accessible and more easy for them to gauge how much effort they have to put in to get to a specific degree of output? Does that resonate with you? I think it resonates with everyone. But for you, Simon, I think when we talked about this, it feels like, yeah, obviously I want to know if I have a return on my investment.
I would say actually this is one of our biggest challenges at the moment,
Okay.
because everybody is excited about, oh yeah, that's cool. It's fun how it looks like, and it should make my life easier. But there is a thing which I would call the entry barrier. So first, it's a bit more what you need to put in. You need to pick up the phone. You need to write an email to get in touch with someone. So there are many, sometimes even very low hurdles, but they prevent people to actively, let's say, join the journey and get started with it. So, what I saw often, we try to promote it, even with demonstrations during town hall meetings, where people also can hide a bit among each other. So they are kind of just a group of people like we are here today, and everyone's, well, it's interesting, but did they really raise the hand and apply for it to get into it? No, often not. And that's where I try to change the strategy and rather go one to one. Because if you are eye to eye and you have, let's say, a solid, normal business relationship, people won't lie to you. So they don't say, yes, I do, and then they don't do. Okay, sometimes it happens. There are always these black sheeps out there, but normally that works quite well. And then you get a real commitment that they say, yes, I do it. I tried. I do it with my next thing. So you can really make it firm, put some dates behind, and that helps a lot. It's a lot of work because you really need to go again back personal as we had before. But this really brings people over this first entry barrier. And what I had as well, good experiences with, is that you let people talk from the company. So we have some users which are really first-hand users, and if they can share their experiences and how easy it was for them, that can help as well. So it's just two thoughts for the
And
beginning.
the entry barrier, Simon, I mean, how do you see that reducing? Do you sometimes incentivize that, or how does it work? Because
Yeah, it's a thought which we actually are having at the moment to say, can we even put an incentive? Thereby, you need to understand, Emmi is a very decentralized organization, so I don't have the force of a line power that I can say you have to. I mean, that would be the easiest. Unfortunately, not, or probably it's also good that we don't have it. So we really need to convince people, and thereby it can also help with incentives. But what I also would like to have a closer look that people really get this extra time which they need at the beginning. Because what I hear constantly from everybody out there is I have no time. Now here's the solution to gain time. So how do I get them in? Because the entry barrier is adding time. So that's the equation which I still try to balance in a better way. And there it's a bit of negotiation because sometimes people understand certain tasks as super urgent, super important, but in fact, if they would look closer, it was just another task which they are
Yeah.
trying to solve.
I might just add a question which just came in, and the question was, how do you deal with naysayers? And I think you answered it already, more or less, Simon, but people who just are against it and argue it's too much effort to start. But you said already it's a bit of a negotiation, so you need to convince them about the value or maybe use others to help them to understand the value.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's in a situation like we are, I don't try to sell it to everyone. It's building very much on what you said before on how to sell it to whom. Here it's also about who is the most interested in your group, and it's kind of trying to get the critical mass into play with the new tools. And I'm sometimes, if I can afford it, if this is not an opinion leader, that's most important. If this is, let's say, a kind of standard user which does not affect, which doesn't only have limited influence on the other users, you might really think about to leave him, her aside and focus on the others which are willing to jump onto the topic. Because once you have sufficient people on it, the one will feel left behind and trying to catch up. That's at least
Yeah.
my theory.
No, I agree, and I think this might be even a good over
Perfect.
like a transition to the next topic, social influence.
Exactly. It's a perfect segue, basically, because you never live in a vacuum. If you are an individual, if you work in a company, you're always influenced by what is around you. So there are always social norms or social influence at play that also influence you and your perception and your awareness about any new tool, any new initiative. So what you can do, and I think that's something that you also mentioned earlier, that you can actually make it a group task. You can make it easier for them to maybe hide behind a group as well. So it's not too much effort or it's not too dangerous to address or to get used to a new tool. And you have that influence. I think you had an opinion leader was your term for it, that you let them do the talking, because it's always something that I would trust more. It's if it's coming from a person that I trust, that I know is not my boss or is not the vendor itself, and they can tell me and convince me that something is actually worth my time and effort to put into. And I think what also happens and what also needs to be considered, especially for ongoing adoption, is that you have to have some ways for people to exchange and keep on exchanging. So have a forum, have some ways for them to talk about like the tool or to address issues together and also share the expertise that they have made. Is that something you have? Like, do you actually have forums or an intranet board, or I don't know, something that helps people internally to know how to use a specific tool?
I mean, actually, Maggie, as a Microsoft, let's say, full adopted Microsoft company almost. We have a lot of tools, and we also use Viva Engage, as it's called now, for Yammer, which we can use. But also there, you always need to have a host like we have today, Lukas, who is starting it up, who is managing it, who is bringing the attention on a certain topic. What I'm currently intended to do with my colleagues is also to make it very cool to be part of this story. So that's something where, I mean, some people are very reluctant to that, but others are always, they like if something is cool, if it's state of the art to work with. And how can you do this? I'm a strong believer to give them also a platform towards management, not only to me, but even to top management. I mean, I have these lanes open, so I can use this to say, hey, I'm looking for a group which has good experience, and they present to the top management or so. That's something which might attract people to get into it. Or as we said before, with incentivation, having some gifts for this crew which already adopted it. The early adopter gets that, the first 10,000 users get something, whatever it could be. Or what I also thought about, a little bit more exclusivity to those which are adopting it, so that we say, okay, we invite you for a meeting, for an event, or whatever. So to really put something out which is not always monetary, because that's very hard for us, but to have something which is more on the intrinsic motivation of people.
So non-monetary bribing to some degree.
To some degree, yes.
Yeah. No, it's cool. It's nice. That's a good idea.
And I think it's very similar to when we, for example, talk to new clients or potential new clients, we always tell them, talk to an existing client, because obviously I will be very happy to talk about Archlet, but it's much more influencing if someone else who's not directly connected to Archlet talks about us. So I think influencers always work not only for technology adoption, it's also it works a lot to build trust, right? Because you suddenly have a, let's say, less biased view, which in the end gives you more trust to try something or to pursue an interest. So I 100% agree that I think maybe even the most powerful tool, but it can also go in the other way around, right? If, as you said, if there are very strong people with strong opinions and they speak up, it's also social influence, but on the other side, right? It
Right.
hinders them to use certain things because they influence it in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and probably what I might add here is another thought, which I don't use often enough, and I'm a strong believer that it could deliver power, is kind of management awareness. So bring it to the management agenda so that they take it into their meetings, that they are curious about, that they hear left and right, that others were successful, that they had great result out of a tool. Managers are typically quite competitive, so they want to get it as well, and this will start to have a positive dynamic also on the other teams then.
So a bit of FOMO, making use of them not wanting to miss out on something.
Yeah, exactly. It goes in that direction.
Nice. It's actually like, what can you do, and also what we can do? I know there were two questions about like how we as a vendor also have influence on technology adoption. I think one of the other conditions, like the last one on the model that we looked at, is actually facilitating conditions. And I think this is the one that externally you can have the most effect on, or you can most gauge it, because that means the degree or what the individual sees is actually available for them to use and to learn the tool, or to support them in their being and their day-to-day as an individual, as an employee there. And I think that's something that we talked about as well. You mentioned that you use the Microsoft Office space, and there are so many good ways on how to also make information easily to find internally. So have something that is an easily accessible knowledge hub. And trust me, most of your vendors have also some content that they can share with you. So it's not too much effort that you actually build up a knowledge hub on this one. And you enable contact to internal and external champions. So external champions is typically from the vendor or a partner organization or something. But you should also make it easy for people to find someone internally who's actually a good person to talk to about a specific tool or new process in here. And I think last one, and then I hand over to you again, Simon, is if you're introducing something new, have you ever thought about taking something away as well from people? So what you mentioned earlier as well is that people say like, I don't have the time. Like, why do I have to deal with this on top of everything that I already have? So one good approach could be to just think about a process, anything else that you can sunset, that you can subtract from their day to day. Is that something you did in the past?
We always try. Because that's, I mean, nowadays where tools evolve almost daily, and also technology which you have at your fingertips, which you don't even need to do contracts and to pay for, which are just for free available. It moves that fast that you also need to think about all the things which you just need to let go. So we often talk about unlearning, so really relearning things, and not just sticking blindly to the old processes which we had. And at the moment, we're probably unlearning Excel. No, joking. Excel is still a big tool, but nevertheless, in certain circumstances, it's simply not the best anymore. And that's also where we need to create this curiosity. I always say what we we invest a lot about for the awareness of a certain tool, but then this desire to really jump onto it. And I think it's pretty comparable to all the marketing which your companies are probably doing. No one of you would just do once, or let's say pay once for a billboard and have his commercial out there and then it's gone. You really need to have a strong stream of communication, and they're creating all the opportunities to, hey, pick up the phone, hey, take the email. So plenty of opportunities wherever you look at, which makes it so easy to just adapt this technology. Then that's the moment where you hit people at the right spot in the right moment, because that's what I figured out as well. It's often about being there when the situation comes across. So being at the right time, and this probability is simply increased if I have more touch points with them.
And I think
So you
that
say
is like
that,
kind of the ADCAR model for those that wonder
Yeah,
where it's coming
exactly.
from, like the AD in
Yeah,
ADCAR. So for those
exactly.
interested.
So really to
nice.
also once this desire is popping up, so that the campaign is right next to their eyes, and there it is, then I go. Otherwise, you need a lot of luck that you hit the right spot.
Maybe a stupid question, Simon, but you have probably a rather large marketing team, because it happens to me if I walk in a retailer, I direct and I buy fondue, I might go to an Emmi fondue area, right? Have you ever thought about to use their strategies and kind of tools to do their work, what they do externally for internal
Not
campaigns?
yet, but actually, this would probably really be the next level of tool
Yeah,
advertisement. I mean, ultimately, we try to convince with the advantage, but nevertheless,
yeah.
these facilitating conditions are not to underestimate them. That's what I would say.
Perfect. So I think we would love to summarize your key learnings, Simon. We have summarized three takeaways where we think they are definitely worthwhile taking or giving our listeners on the way. Do you want to guide them through, or should I go ahead, Simon?
Oh, I can do this for you. No problem. No problem. So the first is the one which we started off. Actually, it's really about understanding the internal customer and their challenge. That's absolutely key, because if people don't see it this way, you won't be successful in my opinion. And you always might have the chance to influence them individually and show it to them individually, but that's where the detail work starts, which is definitely worth doing for the opinion leaders. Then steer the perception and increase the awareness with proactive communication on all levels. That's what we heard before as well, so that it's not only the one which is affected, it's also the management level which needs to know about this initiative and what it could deliver, what advantages are connected to it. Especially if you have some doubts out there, it might be beneficial to proactively weed out that doubts by the right counter arguments, to not having something out there which you then need to run after and try to correct, because that's very hard if a message is once in people's mind. And make usage or make usage of a target, but offer plenty of support and adequate time. Yes, for me, the time bit is probably the one which is most critical, because all your teams will suffer by saying we don't have the time to get into it. So think about what you can subtract, as Maggie said. Think about what you can let go to help them to get into it, because in its nature, the tools which we are looking at are providing a lot of benefits afterwards, a lot of advantages, often efficiencies, which creates then again time which you probably can use again to fill with these older tasks. But I'm sure you will find plenty of new tasks about how you can fill that time.
Thank you so much, Simon. I just wanted to say thank you for joining us. We have learned a lot during the preparation, but also in the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, we worked together. We are super proud to have you as a client, and thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Thank
And we actually have some 4 minutes time for Q&A, and there was already a question incoming, and it's about the duration of an adoption. What's a timeline? And of course, I think this really depends on the software you implement. But do you have, maybe you or you, Maggie or Simon, do you have kind of a golden rule how long such an adoption program should go? Can it be too long? Can it be too short? Any experiences from your side?
Yeah, probably I can step in here first, and then Maggie, you might have some background information which you can add. Personally, I think it usually takes longer than what you expect. On the other end, I always was a big fan of creating some speed to implement it. So really to be fast, also to not have people thinking about other ideas, especially in the ERP context. Formally, here at Archlet at the moment, it's also a bit triggered to how often do you have tenders in your business? How many multi-source situations do you have where you can easily apply the tool in businesses where this is widely spread and takes a big chunk of the daily work? I think the adoption is way faster and easier done compared to a business as we have it, where only now and then tenders happen, as we have rather steady state business with our suppliers. Yeah. So typically, I would say longer than expected. That's from my experience. On the other end, it's also cool if you can maintain speed so that it's not just a never-ending story, because the excitement is also decreasing, and then it's getting more and more hard to convince people to jump into, because why should they if no one else did?
Yeah. Maybe just to build up on that, because you just mentioned that it really depends on what you're trying to implement, what kind of software. In sourcing, you're heavily dependent on the market conditions. You're heavily dependent on, can you actually change a supplier or not? And there was a question about how exactly what we talk now relates to procurement. So is it different? Like the comment was actually, we talked about the topic quite broadly, right? Let's say not only focusing on a specific procurement use case. The question is, does it change in procurement? Like when you now talk about procurement technology adoption, how do you make it more tangible for procurement? I strongly believe it highly depends on what you're trying to implement, but can you break it down on a procurement perspective as well, Simon?
Not sure if I get the question get the question
Yeah,
right here.
so I can read it. So it is, he said that the talk we had was quite on an abstract level,
Mhm.
and I'm missing the procurement specific arguments.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do we have procurement specific arguments which drive technology adoption?
Yeah, there I have an opinion. At the moment, Archlet is one piece of a puzzle which we are currently focusing on. And what we often heard in the past was that people were locked in with operational procurement and didn't find time for strategic procurement. And with technology itself, I think we can resolve some of these hassles, because we can start to automate more on the operational procurement, so help these guys to do a better job and think about how they procure. And on the other end of the strategic procurement, and I'm very much with what Lukas said, that there's a lot of blank spots at the moment. So the people are simply not that much used to technology. They are still using a lot of emails, Excels, and all that stuff. Whereas new technologies emerge, which could definitely help them to do their work in a, let's say, better way or in a more efficient way. So both ways are possible. So here I see a lot of potential and benefits for the procurement function by adopting digital technologies, which nowadays are not yet widely spread.
Thank you. Then last question, Maggie, maybe in your direction, how do you measure successful adoption? Any best practices?
You have to have the measures first. And so you have to define, what is the metric? Is the metric one-time use or continued use? And I think that is very different depending on the tool you're using. And continued use is something that you I know that we talked about this with a customer. That's something that is actually also measured in like one-to-ones in actual performance reviews. And that's like ways that you also have to consider, like what metrics do I have? How do I measure them? And how do I keep track of them and report them? And I think that is highly dependent on the tool, but to measure it is to first understand what is success for me. Is it a one-time use? Is it a continued use? Is it achieving some financial results? So savings, for example, with a sourcing tool, or is it also on saving time? And how do you measure that time? And to measure that time, you have to know how long it takes before. So ideally, before you actually adopt a problem, or not adopt a software tool, you have to know like what is the status quo, because only then you can measure the success of that adoption. And I think that is something that people usually forget about and also have like in hindsight, I think about like how do I actually compare it to what has been there before.
Makes sense. So you need to define success criteria, and then what you also refer to is ideally an adoption leads to a value, which leads to a right for existence for the tool, right?
Yeah.
That when you adopt it well and it's used in the way it should be used, and it solves the problem, ideally you have an ROI which actually justifies that you add more value than before.
Yeah, you have to tie it to your business goals, because just usage alone is not a good indicator.
Any last words from your side, Simon?
Yeah, probably. I'm just guessing here, but looking at all the apps which you're using day in, day out, very, very naturally, I know behind them there are often marketing specialists which are analyzing extremely detailed what we are using, how we are using, and if not. So there are for sure also the concepts behind how you can measure this. What we often use here at Emmi very pragmatically, as we have surveys which you can do very easily, we often ask people about the Net Promoter Score, if you are familiar with that. So we simply ask them, would you recommend it to your coworkers to work with a certain tool? And that gives a very, very good signal in which direction the tool is on the way, without
Nice.
having it very quantitative.
Good one. Well, we are a bit over time now. However, we went through all the questions, and if there was just one more, but we will answer it afterwards, or it actually was a learning, I think. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again, Simon, for sharing your experience in your I think more than 10 years of experience in procurement at implementing tools and software and making sure the processes are in line. Thank you also, Maggie, for joining us, sharing an academia view, but also sharing your experience you had with Archlet in the last 2 years. So I think that's it from our side, and we will share the recording, and also we'll probably write a short summary on our website, and let us know if you have any more questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.